Good afternoon. Thank you for coming here. First of all, welcome to the World Social Forum again, and thank you for the Secretariat for organizing it. As we told them yesterday, this is going to be, even though it's called World Social Forum, we're feeling that the World Social Forum owes us another forum on Palestine. We're thinking of this as a trial run, a rehearsal, and then we're going to have something really big. Yeah, because there were a lot of issues. There is a lot of challenges when you're dealing with a colonized community, not colonized internally, but colonized by a colonial power, settler colonial power, such as Israel. There's going to be all sorts of challenges coming up to try to get people to speak, to try to get people visas, to try to get people tickets. There's all sorts of things will be happening, especially in the age of neoliberal capitalism, especially in the ages of tightening border controls and so on. So this is one of the reasons also that Comrade Leila Khaled, who would have loved to be here with us, she has been on all the World Social Forums, except for the one on Palestine, is unable to be with us. It's very sad, but it is a reflection of the reality. This is a reflection of, so we don't forget, because sometimes we forget we're sitting here having discussions and so on, that we are dealing with a colonial structure. And all of this and the fact that a lot of Palestinians could not make it, either because they weren't given visas, exit visas, or entry visas, or because there wasn't money to cover their tickets and so on. All of this is as a result of this structure we're talking about. So we can talk about individuals, but we're really dealing with big structures. And that's why we feel that you do owe us a big social forum, that this will be a good, excellent seminar. It's wonderful, try and run for it, but we do want to have a big social forum that actually focuses on all the questions of Palestine. Okay, so what we will be doing today, we have Leila Khaled with us, and she is right there. And I don't know, what time is it, Leila, over there? Later, right, at night. Okay, but you stay up late, right? It's part of the struggle. And we have also with us three other speakers. We have a compañera from Brazil, Marisa Mendes, who is going to be giving a short 5-minute presentation discussion about women in Brazil, trade union struggle in Brazil, as well as solidarity with the Palestinian women. Then what we will do is we're going to hear from Leila before we lose the connection. We don't want to kind of risk that, and she will stay with us to the rest. And then Brewer, Angela Davis, and myself are also going to be speaking. We're going to run it as a roundtable, try to get as many questions as possible. We did ask the Secretariat, we do have a film about Leila Khaled. I don't like the title. It's called Leila Khaled Hijacker with a question mark. I don't know what Leila thinks of it, but I think it has a lot of content that we can discuss. So if there is a need, we will try to be showing it later on this evening. If not, we'll do it in another social forum. So are you going to be joining me, or you want to stay down there, or what would you like to do?
Well, we were just trying to see Leila. So.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, so compañera Marisa, why don't you come in, and Anna, you're going to be translating for her, right? Okay, so we will be you'll be speaking for 5 minutes, and then we're going to hear from Leila and do. Okay, so thank you, please.
Is it better first, Leila?
Come here.
Okay.
I think she's not going to hear if you're over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
She can take the microphone.
Oh, you can take the microphone over there if you'd like. But she's going to only be here if you're speaking next to the computer.
Primeiramente, a saudação a todos os presentes, homens e mulheres lutadores contra a opressão na Palestina que estão presentes aqui nesse Fórum Mundial. É um prazer estar aqui falando com vocês todos.
Hi, fellow men and women from around the world. I really appreciate that everybody's here in this forum struggling against colonialism and imperialism.
Principalmente em uma mesa dessa que representa a luta das mulheres contra a opressão machista no mundo.
This panel is very special for us because it's discussing gender and it's a very precious issue to discuss.
Eu faço parte de um movimento aqui no Brasil, um movimento Mulheres em Luta, que é um movimento classista, que é ligado a uma central sindical com lutas, e do Sindicato dos Metroviários de São Paulo, sou da Secretaria de Mulheres desse sindicato.
Marisa is from a feminist organization called Mulheres em Luta, Women in Struggle. This feminist organization is related to a popular trade union called Conlutas.
Nós temos procurado divulgar a luta do povo palestino em nossas atividades e também a luta e a vanguarda que as mulheres palestinas têm tomado nessa luta, não só agora, mas todo o decorrer da luta palestina e de todo o mundo árabe, na Síria, Líbano, e todas as mulheres que têm se destacado nessa luta contra a exploração imperialista e a opressão machista.
We've been promoting plenty of activities and demos about the struggle in the Middle East, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, especially the issue of feminism and women in struggle.
O machismo, o capitalismo e o imperialismo, eles se apropriam da opressão machista para poder tirar mais lucros dos seus negócios. Colocaram a mulher no mercado de trabalho e hoje as mulheres sem condições de exercerem seus serviços e não tiraram das mulheres que foram colocadas no mercado de trabalho, a obrigação do trabalho doméstico, causando a dupla jornada de trabalho.
So capitalism takes advantage of sexism, chauvinism, and this is one of our two of exploitation against women, because of this, women has double journey.
Essa situação banalizada no capitalismo, colocada de uma forma natural, a opressão machista, a violência contra as mulheres, e nós temos dados assim bastante impressionantes, que o Brasil está em 7º lugar no ranking das mulheres assassinadas pelo feminídio, que é o assassinato de mulheres por seus companheiros ou ex-companheiros. E também 10 mulheres morrem por dia aqui no Brasil assassinadas.
Brazil has very terrible rates of murder against women. We are the 7th country around the world in murdering women.
E isso revela a cara do imperialismo, não só em todo lugar, e também no mundo ocidental. Aqui também a gente assiste todos os dias na TV programas, telenovelas que mostram mulheres sendo estupradas, mulheres sendo agredidas de forma violenta, como se fosse a coisa normal do dia a dia das pessoas. Isso aparece todos os dias na TV e nós temos feito uma campanha contra a TV principal do Brasil por causa desse tipo de programação.
And Brazil is quite generalized and naturalized on television, aggressions against women. Women are murdered and raped on TV shows in Brazil, and Mulheres em Luta, Women in Struggle, have been fighting against this, and they have been struggling against the biggest TV channel in Brazil because of these wrong TV shows.
Então, assim, o que eu queria colocar é que mesmo a gente hoje tendo aqui no país uma mulher na presidência, isso não significou uma diminuição dos índices de violência, não significou uma mudança de qualidade no nível de vida das mulheres. E para nós, então, isso é muito importante, que não basta ser mulher para poder mudar as condições de vida das mulheres hoje no mundo capitalista.
So here in Brazil we learned that it's not enough a male president, because this fact didn't change women reality in Brazil. So it's not necessarily only a woman in the presidency. It must be against capitalism.
Por isso, nós lutamos para um feminismo que esteja ligado à luta dos trabalhadores, um feminismo que não seja um feminismo superficial, e que seja um feminismo realmente de luta e que esteja ligado diretamente à luta dos trabalhadores contra a opressão e contra a exploração.
We struggle every day for a feminist, not always related to the classism, against capitalism, against exploitation and oppression.
E queria declarar aqui que nós estamos solidários à luta das mulheres palestinas. Nós somos mulheres brasileiras, mas somos palestinas também. E nós somos solidários à luta de todo o povo palestino e todos os trabalhadores, porque nós achamos que a luta dos trabalhadores é uma luta universal, não é uma luta que está ligada a um país, e que todos juntos, trabalhadores, devem lutar contra a opressão e contra a exploração. Só juntos, homens e mulheres, poderemos romper com esse ciclo de violência contra o povo trabalhador, não só aqui, como na Palestina, no Líbano e em todos os países.
So our struggle, we believe that our struggle is international, and feminism must be connected with classes, must be connected with anti-capitalism, and we support Palestine cause and other Arab revolutions like Lebanon, Syria, Tunis, Egypt, whatever. And we are all, we are all Brazilian women, but we also are all Palestinian women. Thank you.
Obrigada, companheira Mendes. Thank you so much. These topics that companheira Mendes has raised recur in many other struggles. Just because if a woman president does not mean that there is going to be a change in the society and so on. You know all these issues. So this is part of the discussion, but I'm unable to turn the iPad again. So. Okay, I'm not as okay. So what we did is we actually had. Can you take this? Yeah, thank you. So we basically this panel is about gender and resistance against colonial feminism, but not just against colonial feminism, but also we want to think about how do we craft solidarity with Palestinian women and men, Palestinian people's struggle for liberation. So what we did is we came up with several questions and asked the panelists which one of them they would like to address, and I will read them to you. And I know Leila already said that she would like to address question 3 and 7, and so we will have her start with that. So and then we can continue in case we get the connection. Hopefully it won't get cut off. So the first question is, how are women and men in Palestine, as well as other liberation movements, represented, and what are the assumptions made about gender dynamics in these movements? Second question, why do these representations and assumptions emerge in the first place, and why do they persist? Third, are the experiences of Palestinian women and men similar to those in other liberation movements, marginalized communities, or exceptionally different? This speaks to the whole exceptionalism of Palestine, or the notion of the exceptionalism of Palestine. Fifth, do you agree with the term colonial feminism? If so, do you agree with the critique of colonial feminism that it has given a feminist cover to the US invasion of Afghanistan, of course later in Iraq, and or that colonial feminism has acted as an instrument for a right-wing and racist agenda that pretends to save brown women from brown men, as Gayatri Spivak first said, and brown queers from brown communities. There is a very important queer panel about queer liberation in Palestine this afternoon at 2, and I encourage everybody to go and attend. There's one tomorrow as well. And brown queers from brown communities. How do we challenge colonial feminism, and what basis? Do we just abandon feminism? Do we think feminism is relevant, and so on? What does Orientalism, Zionism, racism, apartheid, Islamophobia, and colonialism have to do with women's liberation? And finally, how do we go about crafting justice-centered analytical frameworks and build movements towards women's and human liberation? So, Leila, welcome again, and thank you for staying up to talk with us. We are really happy to have you. We did not think it was going to work because all the time technical difficulties happen whenever Palestine is involved, but it took a very long time to even find this auditorium. I can tell you stories, but that will be in ethnographic notes later on. Okay, so Leila wants to deal with question 3, which says, what are some of your observations about Palestinian women and men and the Palestinian struggle for self-determination? That's number 3, and then number 7, what does Orientalism, Zionism, racism, apartheid, and colonialism have to do with women's liberation? Leila, can you do that in 10 minutes as a start?
Yes.
Like it's a thesis, but okay, all right, please. Okay, Leila Khaled.
I'm really glad to address you, and I'm glad that you are there united and to raise your voices in this forum for Palestine. This is an honor to me to address you. Thank you very much, Rabab, for giving me the opportunity to be on your panel. Let me go to the question. I don't have observations, but I'm giving the realities of the struggle itself for not only self-determination, but also for the right for return. And this is the key for the ending the conflict itself, because the Palestinian issue is of two core issues: the land to be sovereign in, and the people, the return of the refugees to their homelands and to their villages and cities. Second, as for the struggle, any people who are under occupation or under any kind of oppression, they revolt, they resist, because they want to prove their existence, because they are human beings. As for the Palestinian women and men, I think for 1 century, the Palestinians were resisting all the plots and all conspiracies since the beginning of the last century. But women did not begin as organized movement in the struggle, but because they were a part of the oppression that they are suffering from as well as men. In the liberation movement, we can't differentiate between men and women as people suffering, because they all suffer, especially when it is occupation, like the Israeli occupation. It is a terrorist act all the time, and unless we get our freedom, then this terrorist act done by the occupants themselves, they inflict atrocities upon human beings, whether they are women or men. But I can say that Palestinian women are an example for all women in the world under oppression, the way they resisted. And I can just brief that after 1967, especially after 1967, many women, hundreds and thousands of women were involved in the armed struggle since 1967. And there are prominent examples, like Shadia Abu Ghazali, who was the first martyr in the beginning of the revolution, and other women. They were the same as men, doing the same thing what men were doing. There is nothing in the liberation movement and in the struggle that there is a past for women and a past for men. They are equal in the suffering, so they are equal in the struggle itself. There is no discrimination in the struggle. Women can do the same as men, and men can do the same as women. So this is the main point that I wanted to raise in this answering this question. And at the same time, when we speak about the Palestinian question, we are speaking about a unique one. There is in history we never heard, we never read, we never knew that there was a people who was uprooted from their homelands and countries and replaced by other people who do not belong to their land. It's because the balance of forces after the Second World War happened to be to the side of the Zionist movement and the imperialists, and founding Israel as a state in this area. Now, there are also some observations on how women, Palestinian women, reached to be a part of the decision makers. It took us a long time. We were represented in all factions. We were holding arms, the same thing as other members of those factions, but we were not represented in the institutions as equal as men. I know it's difficult to be equal because we are in a society that maleism is dominating. But women could, by their struggle against the national struggle and the social struggle, and we really, I'm proud that I'm a woman, and at the same time, I'm proud as you that we are resisting occupation itself for free Palestine. So, this is the main issue that I can raise now in this panel, that it took us a long way for gaining our rights as women. Although I know very well that rights of women is the same as human rights. So, to implement human rights, it means to implement the rights for women. But we didn't reach this into this situation because we are under occupation. I am still a refugee. I can't go back to my homeland. So how can women outside their country can practice self-determination except by spreading a culture of the right for return? And this is the important issue. How to determine for ourselves if we are not on our land. So for men and women, it's important to be on our land and sovereign on that land, not under occupation. We cannot practice self-determination, and according to the international law, which says people have the right to practice their self-determination in their homeland. Now, we are still struggling to go back to our homeland. So we cannot practice our self-determination except to be guaranteed that we can go to our homeland and there we can decide our future with anybody else who would like to share us how to determine our future. As for the other question, I can speak about Zionism, racism, apartheid, and colonialism. Orientalism, it's something else. All these are anti-human issues and anti-human movements. Those are the oppressors of the humankind. Zionism, racism, apartheid, colonialism, these are one camp that are against humanity, against the development of humanity. They are the oppressors. So oppressors cannot give any opportunity for women for their liberation, because they are against freedom, against liberation, against all values of humanity. So they all share inflicting atrocities on human beings, especially women. How can a woman struggle when she is deprived from her identity as a human being? She cannot. Neither she nor the man nor the society itself, except by resistance. And when I say by resistance, it means resistance with all means, including armed struggle according to the United Nations Charter in its 8th article, that calls upon people that they have the right to resist by all means when they are oppressed, by all means including armed struggle. That's why I insist that all these Zionism, it's not only an ideology, it is reactionary and it is a terrorist movement which played a role after the Second World War to occupy our land and our homes by force and by power. So Zionism is another kind of a system, and it was now in the United Nations. But after 1990, it is the first time in history of the United Nations this resolution about Zionism was deleted, because the balance of forces on the international level was for the Zionist movement. That's why we cannot speak about feminism as an ideology, but also as a Zionist movement that a part of the imperialist powers in the world, imperialist countries, especially the old colonizers from Europe, England, France, and Germany, and Italy, and on to the Middle East area. But Zionism is also based on apartheid. Apartheid is the easiest phase of oppression, and we have seen that in South Africa, and now we are seeing it and living the realities of apartheid in Palestine. Colonialism after the First World War, and that the superpowers at that time, they divided the whole world for their supervision and for their being colonizing other people in the world. The Second World War, it is substituted by the imperialists, which the United States is the leader of colonials. So when we speak about women and how can they be free, how can they be equal in rights and duties, with all these we have a long way to walk all together, not apart from each other. That's why I say that I'm happy, I'm glad that you are here gathering to raise your voices against all these Zionism, racism, apartheid, colonialism, and we overcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so what we actually can stay in the room. Oh, sorry. We can stay in the room until 2, but we're not going to stay in the room until 2 because we know at 2 o'clock there are other panels that are going to start. So we will end at 1:45. Take 15 minutes more. This way we can have more time for discussion and also make sure that all of you get to the panels that you need to get to. Okay. So we're going to have, let me add a couple of things to what Leila has talked about, and then I'll turn it over to both my colleagues Rose and my colleagues and sisters and colleagues Rose and Angela. Okay. So I want to add to what Leila was, she spoke specifically, very clearly about the role of Palestinian women and men. And actually the reason we talk about women and men, because we want to talk about gender dynamics. We don't want to only talk, gender does not equal women. So we want to make sure that we're talking about the whole society and think about things in a dialectical manner. Women's liberation, people's liberation are connected very much with each other. So there is the way in which Palestinian women are represented historically, specifically in other colonial settings, okay, by the colonizers. And it is a very premeditated, a deliberate way of doing it. It's not accidental, it's not unintentional, it's very clear, specifically in order to kind of undermine the struggle of the people against colonialism. And we have seen it in many ways, so I'm sure a lot of the stuff you know. But Palestinian women and other women in liberation movements are represented as incapable of struggling. If they are struggling, if they are in militant movements, they are represented as duped. They are duped by the movement. Robin Morgan, in her book, The Demon Lover, actually argues that Palestinian women in particular are seduced by the sexual prowess of the masculine figure of the heterosexual terrorist. And then she had a new preface written for the book after 9/11/2001 to elaborate on this. Also, Palestinian women and other women are represented as stupid, that they're only struggling only to be sent back to the kitchen after the process of liberation, like Algerian. That's what happened to Algerian women, and it's actually not really necessarily accurate about the question of Algerian women either. Okay, so then you have, where do you start addressing this? So so why do women participate? And after the the second Intifada in 2000, Palestinian women participated in suicide bombing. So then we have the theorists coming up to us and telling us that Palestinian women participate, like Andrea Dworkin, not because they are participating, as Leila says, because they are part of their people's struggle, because they are colonized exactly like the other parts of the Palestinian people, men and so on. The revolution is not the men's property, it's for all the Palestinians, but they participate in order for them to cleanse their honor, otherwise they will be killed. And it's very interesting because some people argue that women do it because they're going to be killed anyway by their families, so they might as well do it themselves as self-determination. However, this rational argument does not get applied when you talk about the Palestinian suicide bomber Istishhadi, that they may have very rational reasons for participating in taking away their own lives, because their life is going to be taken away by colonialism. And I think there is a South African scholar, Akil Mbebe, does a very good job of arguing this in an article called Necropolitics and Public Culture. But we can talk about that later. So then Palestinian women are never seen as participating because they're Palestinians. There is always all these other opportunistic reasons that they are participating. One of the things that happens with Palestinian women, and I want to just talk about this and then I will stop. Okay, it's on this page. I want to actually, because it was very interesting, we were talking about the demonstration yesterday. Some people were saying we should have the women and the children first, okay, in the front, and then we'll lead with everybody else. And I want to just say a couple of things about the whole question of motherhood and the question of always bringing women and children together. I think it's a very good device in order to kind of like mobilize human rights community and so on. But it becomes very interesting that the children are always naturally attached to the women, but they are not naturally attached to the men. So then fatherhood becomes sort of absent. It's kind of like, and then people say, why is it that men are not around? But you already isolated them and separated them and expelled them from the scene of affection and emotion and taking care of the family by already saying that they don't come. Okay, so this is one thing. The other thing is the whole question of motherhood. So there are a lot of issues that get raised about Palestinian mothers in particular, which I call motherhood deficiency. We have motherhood deficiency as opposed to other people around the world. It's very interesting. And in motherhood deficiency, Palestinian women, mothers and fathers, are represented as not being caring for their children. So Omni magazine, in the first Intifada, said that Palestinian parents don't hug their children enough. That's why they go and become violent and throw stones at very simple, peaceful symbols of Israeli occupation, like the tanks and the bullets and the rubber bullets and the guns and everything else. Then the Israeli, actually, I have quotes from Israeli spokespeople like Dore Gold or Israeli commanders, battalion colonel Guy and so on, who say that they send their children to die. They not only don't love their children, but they send their children to die, and they are cowards because they don't go themselves to die, they send their children to die. Then the Israelis say that, okay, so we wouldn't be surprised if Palestinians send a pregnant woman to commit suicide bombing. So if you go yourself, you don't have any value of humanity, or you're trying to do some other reasons, opportunistic reasons or whatever reason. If the children go on their own, the children are also seen as being used by their parents who don't care for them and thus don't care for humanity and human rights and so on, to die. And so there is always, and they're represented as cowards. They have no courage. There is a lot of evidence in various writings from Eileen MacDonald, who wrote a book, and actually she has a whole chapter interview with Leila Khaled called Shoot the Women First, which is a statement that German intelligence officers said that if you have a woman militant, you shoot her first, because she's even more dangerous than the man. But then they go on to say that the women militant are unnatural women. They have a lot of hair growing on their bodies, they may be lesbian. There is also, it's very, very interesting. But there is a chapter in the book that is titled The Intifada is My Son. And this woman, Eileen MacDonald, says that the Palestinian women, during the first Intifada, we've seen this a lot. Every woman claims that all the children are her children. They're not her children, but she wants to protect them. So it's very interesting the way these things, the whole take on motherhood, gets played in this. If the women go to take care of the children, they're kind of like participating in terrorism. If the children go on their own, and you know children don't listen to their parents anyway, any children anywhere in the world, but there is an exceptionality to Palestine. In the particular case of Palestine, the children are obedient and they go to die because their parents send them to die. You know, it's very interesting. And so there is a lot of the stuff that kind of like keeps, and one of the responses that have been given, in addition to this, the whole question of saving the children, women and men, and we saw one of the most actually painful and sad images was the image of Muhammad al-Durra's father, when the kid was being shot and shot and shot and shot, and father could not protect him, and he kept putting his arm around him so he wouldn't be killed. He was killed on September 30th, 2000. And the father tried to protect his son, but he couldn't protect his son. He couldn't do what he's supposed to do as a father. But this does not enter the analysis, okay? And then the Palestinian women, actually, there was reputed that Queen Sylvia of Sweden, and then afterwards they retracted the statement that said that Palestinian mothers don't take care of their children. So actually Palestinian mothers came together on October 29th in 2000, I have the statement, and wrote a letter about what the occupation does and how it actually basically it changes all the dynamics and creates different dynamics that maybe also makes the children grow. So actually the children are stolen out of their innocence. So all these images keep coming up, and I'm going to right now stop and turn it over to my colleagues. So, yeah.
First, thanks to all you for being here, and for you, Rabab, for really taking the leadership in bringing us together. It really is an honor to be on this panel. You know, I didn't get the questions, but I've heard what they entail, and I think I want to respond to a couple of them, beginning with this whole notion of colonial feminism, since that's something that is in our title for the session. You know, I come out of a radical Black feminist tradition, and I'm struck by this idea of colonialism because it hasn't always been, I would say, solidly articulated in our frame. And let me say a little bit about that frame. In fact, it is an intersectional frame, and at the center of it is the assertion, and I think the praxis of an integrated analysis, that we're not going to understand patriarchy or sexism without also understanding capitalism and imperialism. And so inherent in that frame is the idea of simultaneity. These systems work together, and the fact that they are highly integrated. There is a piece about that particular set of assertions that take me back to the idea of struggles on the ground. And those are ideas that, in fact, most likely began not in the academy, but in the process of struggle. Again, this is a Black feminist lens, heavily shaped by the US African descent experience. But I'm always struck by the fact that this kind of analytical clarity came from women who were active on the ground, fighting for the liberation of African descent of women in this country and globally. And I'm reminded of the work of the Kambahi River Collective. And in that work of active Black lesbian feminists on the ground was this notion that these are integrated systems. I'm also struck, as I'm thinking about that Black feminist legacy and this term colonialism, how important the intervention of indigenous Native American women from North America have been in stretching our intersective peace. And what I mean here is to very strictly and clearly articulate the fact that the US was founded on colonialism, imperialism, land and labor, the expropriation of native labor and land, and the exploitation of African enslaved labor. And those two pieces set in motion the colonial process. So many indigenous feminist women have indicated that intersectionality works fine, but without the issue of land and labor and colonialism, we're missing a very important aspect of this understanding. So I want to give recognition that we don't precisely use the term colonial feminism, but through the intervention of indigenous women, it goes to the heart of the intersectional piece. So analytically, it started outside of the academy, and I think it says something else about what we're dealing with today, and that is a different kind of representation of women in struggle. And that representation means that we do theory, that we think, that we fight, that we engage in praxis, and that it is entirely possible for us to be transformatory in the kind of work that we do. The second piece that I think we probably want, at least I want to give some attention to, is a very tough issue of solidarity and what that means. By no means do I think it's simple. By no means do I think it's easy. And by no means do I think there's a straightforward answer to it. It's all the complications that Rabab mentioned about what it means. I don't even want to profess to do any kind of superficial comparisons between what's going on with the Palestinian women today and the history of black women in this country. But there are in fact so many parallels, including the death and murder of many women, not only before they were forcibly captured, but after being in this country. There's so many parallels in terms of the representation. We are, in fact, supposedly accountable and responsible for our own oppression, that there is no system in place that is responsible for it. And that as we get into the current period, the idea that the neoliberal approach to the current period of internal U.S. dynamics means that there now are at least 50 million poor people in the United States. A large percentage of those are children, and a good number of them are, of course, women of color. So we are not outside of this nexus of imperialism, neo-imperialism, and empire today. Even though I think there is some misunderstanding, the assumption that by many people, not all, that everyone is privileged in a particular way. And I think this is another reason that the intersectional piece is very powerful, that class as well as gender and sexism and race work in this integrated way, and we need all of those lenses to make sense out of it. So my point around solidarity being a complicated relational building piece, one other thing before I turn it over to Angela, and that is I am pleased to say that there is a history of internationalism in the black struggle. I am sad to say that those connections in recent time have been weakened, probably intentionally, probably deliberately, but have been there. And that the decolonization struggles that happened in the late 60s into the 70s and before that time had everything to do with recognizing that our struggles are interlinked, that decolonization is a global process, that when it happens over there, it must happen also over here. And I would like to see the reinvigoration of those kind of linkages. But I hope we are able to come back to this issue of solidarity, because I think it's a very, very fraught enterprise. And there are ways that we can work together. There are ways that our struggles are distinctive, but there are ways that we must work together. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Rabab for organizing this panel, and let me say what an honor it is to be in the presence of Leila Khaled. And I have followed you for many, many, many years. Thank you for all of your contributions. And it's also amazing to be here in the city at this time, to see that there are so many thousands of people who have come together around the call for solidarity with the Palestinian cause. I want to speak for just a few minutes, and I think I don't know whether I want to specifically respond to the questions, but rather say something that is inspired by, all of the issues that you raise in your questions, Rabab. On the one hand, it seems that we have been waging this struggle for not so much for the inclusion of women in our analyses and in our struggles, but for the transformation of those analyses and struggles by virtue of women's involvement and
طول الكاميرا أشوف.
Leila Khaled.
طول الكاميرا بقى. حطوا الكاميرا أشوفكم. ما سامعة بس في صدى للصوت. بس حطوا لي الكاميرا اشوف في الناس اشوفكم. لا خليها بس معكم.
Can we have luz, por favor? Obrigado.
all right. So I was saying, on the one hand, it seems as if we've been waging these struggles for a very long time. And I was just recalling the 1975 conference in Mexico City, in which there was a major split in the international women's movement. The split involved those who argued that women's struggles were distinctive and all-embracing, and did not include struggles against racism, colonialism, etc. And those, on the other hand, who turned out to be the majority, women from the global south, women involved in struggles against racism in North America and Europe, argued for an approach that integrally related all of these modes of oppression. So, 1975. So I suppose that the term colonial feminisms in many ways recapitulates that long history. And yesterday, as we were participating in the march, some of us happened to be walking behind the mobile stage, and we noticed that every single person who spoke during the entire march was male. And in some ways things have not changed very much, but on the other hand, it was remarkable. It was remarkable, and many people noticed it. So I think that we have developed a kind of feminist consciousness, and I like to think of a Marxist-inflected feminist consciousness that has been expressed in many ways by Palestinian women who have to bring together, all of these issues of colonialism, settler colonialism, the Israeli occupation, racism, male supremacy, etc. What I want to focus on for a moment is a feminist analysis that does not so much depend on bodies we mark as female, but a feminist analysis that can be embraced by all people who are involved in these radical struggles. And one that leads us to also question the function of gender in our in the whole history of struggles against capitalism, struggles against colonialism, one that allows us to question the binary notion of gender. So when we say women's role in the struggle against colonialism, what women are we referring to? And certainly colonial feminisms, to use the term that you've asked us to reflect on, Rabab, make certain assumptions about the universality of the category women. And so when we hear colonial feminists speaking about women, that category comes out of a capitalist framework. It often reflects a racist framework, and certainly it does not include trans women. So I think that what has been so interesting, and especially in relation to the developing struggle for solidarity with Palestinian people, is how we have begun to develop a more complicated approach to gender and gender representation. And finally, what I want to say is that the task facing all of us, wherever we're from, is how to make the question of Palestinian self-determination central to any struggle. Central to struggles that specifically form around issues of gender or sexuality, around issues against issues of racism. And I want to say, along with Rose, and thank you so much for your very insightful comments, that it is going to be important in the United States over the next period to develop a very powerful Black display of solidarity with the Palestinian people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As you know, there is not enough time, right? So we really need kind of like multiple panels on this. Okay, but so what we'll do, we will take questions. Please limit to 1 minute. Ask your questions. We'll take 3 questions, 4 questions. Try to address them. If not, we will do them in the next, period. Maybe we'll be able to have a discussion. Maybe we'll be able to show the film. So, can I see a show of hands? Okay, first come, first served. Okay, okay. I will call on the young woman in the front, then Zakaria. Who else? Okay, Rafif and gentleman there. Okay, go ahead. Can you can say and I will say it, because otherwise she won't hear us.
Okay. My name is Ati, and I'm from South Africa.
Okay, Ati from Janub Africa, from South Africa. Why am I translating? Yeah.
So, I'm thinking about women in the context of Palestine, and I know like the theoretical frameworks of complicating our analysis of women, thinking about all the intersectionalities that complicate our analysis of women are really important. But when I think about like the context of Palestine, where the communities are very religious, either Islamic or Christian.
Back in their place, what will be the situation for Palestine? Zakaria was asking Leila and myself that why do Palestinian women leaders end up kind of like saying that the gender struggle and social struggles, non-political struggles, are secondary, are being told to be secondary to the national struggle, and this is not the time, and so on. And how would we change that in order for us to actually integrate all the struggles together? Rafif was basically really raising not only about the speeches, because that's just indicative, but specifically talking about the whole question of authenticity. In the sense that Palestinians who are not in Palestine, and I guess it depends which Palestine, because before 67, Palestinians inside Israel were called Arabs of Israel. They weren't authentic either. So I don't know, but anyway, I'm sorry, I'm answering. Authenticity. Who is a real Palestinian, who is not a real Palestinian? And who gets to decide who's a real Palestinian and who's not, and whose decision gets to legitimize, right? Including in places like this. Alex from Brazil was asking Leila Khaled to speak about the Union of Palestinian Women's Committees that was headed by Maha Nassar, which is one of the organizations, and asking Leila to give a history, and I'll leave it up to Leila to decide if she can have the time. And then finally, Marisa was asking Angela about Obama, President Obama, and him being a black president. I don't know if that's what he would like to be identified as, but the whole question of the role of racism, the role of race in general has played in American politics, and how does that relate to Palestine? Okay, so why don't we start with Leila, right? You wanna start, Leila, responding to some of the questions, and then I will pass it on to Rose, Angela, and if I have time, I'll respond. If not, we can do it some other time. Okay, Leila, take it.
Thank you for the questions, and they are very genuine questions. The first thing, that in liberation movements, after liberation, it depends upon the leadership. Whether the leadership of the movement itself is from a class that can be to the oppressed and to the marginalized. If it is people who are leadership, then women will go back. This is very clear. And it happened in Algeria, it happened in South Africa, but it didn't happen in Vietnam, for example. It's because the struggle for liberation is a class struggle. It's not a sex struggle. It's a class struggle and an action. That's why we say that women have to reach to be decision makers. This is from one side. As for what I believe, that the national struggle, and this is an answer to what Zakaria asked, the national struggle goes directly with the social struggle. We as Palestinian women, we have achieved some rights for women, some rights. And I say, national struggle always is not before, it's parallel. And we can achieve some steps, some achievements for the rights of our people, while for women it takes more time, because this is the inheritance of humanity, not only Palestinian women or Palestinian societies. That's why I think that this issue depends not only upon women, but also upon the society itself, who recognizes the role of women in the liberation movement, but doesn't recognize the role of women in building homeland after liberation. The third question of who is the real Palestinian? I think anyone with any nationality can gain the Palestinian, the genuine Palestinian identity, as long as one is struggling for the freedom of Palestine and its people. So all of you now are Palestinians. Thank you.
For the young woman who asks about post-liberation issues, women's oppression, from South Africa, right? I think there is an inside question, and it strikes me that the struggle continues. I mean, that is given the way misogyny and patriarchy works. It's a constancy. We're not in a context where that's done. So in some ways, the inside question is not disconnected from that set of structural realities. And that's the other piece. I think we need to think big and have a big picture notion of how these systems work globally. So it's not only about the inside question but it's also about a world in which a certain kind of neoliberal frame, which I think articulates a particular kind of notion of what it means to be gendered, that's a part of the ideological piece that cements and holds transnational capital together. So that outside piece very much is re-articulated in the context of the fact that the liberation struggles that have come before, as you well know in South Africa, have a whole other slew of issues that are not resolved, given the context in which the current realities reside. The struggle continues. Are there lessons that we should have learned and might have learned? Probably yes, but that doesn't get away from the reality that a kind of global social movement which addresses big questions much more broadly, I think that has to be in our arsenal also. So that's my
Angela, and then we really need to finish pretty soon because there are panels starting at 2. I just want to say one thing about the whole question of after. I think it depends when do we think, when is the after? Okay, is ending political apartheid equal to liberation? And I think that's kind of like becomes a big question about I'm not going to respond to the rest of the questions. I think tonight we can think at 9 when there is the concert and so on, we can think about maybe trying to get together tomorrow, maybe having more discussion and so on. If it's necessary, let's seek each other out. And I want to turn it over to Angela.
Okay, I'll just say ditto to what the both of you have said. I don't know whether there's any particular moment when we will be able to say that the struggle has been won, so that kind of complicates the notion of pre and post. And it seems that rather than winning victories, what we always end up doing is transforming the terrain of struggle. Because oftentimes in the process of winning a victory, we become aware of a whole host of problems that have not even begun to be conceptualized prior to that. And certainly in relation to the last question, I think you answered your own question, Marisa, because you pointed out that in having a woman president of Brazil has not changed the realities, especially economic realities for women or for men, which isn't to say that important progress hasn't been made. But certainly in the US, we should never assume that the election of a black president has transformed the economic, social, political realities of the vast majority of black people. A prisoner once said, after the first election, there may be one black man in the White House, but that doesn't cancel out the fact that there are a million black men in the big house. So it seems that, especially on the question of the US support for Israel, it is our responsibility to bring more pressure against the US administration. It is horrendous that in the vote that took place in the UN, was it the day before yesterday? That the US stood with Israel, and Israel was completely isolated in the world. So that means, I think, that we have work to do. The people of the US, progressive people, radical people, the labor movement, all of the anti-racist movements have an enormous amount of work to do over the next period. Thank you.
Before I even thank, I want to just give a shout out to at least 3 workshops that I know about that are following and related very much to what we were talking about. There is a workshop, Palestinian Political Prisoners, by Abdulhadi, and it's at 2. There is a workshop on settler colonialism, apartheid and racism, also at 2. And finally, there is the workshop on sexual discourses in the Zionist project, queer politics and liberation. And each one of these workshops is going to actually build upon as well as our workshop. So first, thank you, Leila. Thank you.